Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness. Welcome to episode 3 of the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. I am with Lucy McConnell today. She is part of the team behind the Recovery Club, which is a support for disordered eating and regaining your period. So today we're going to be talking about hypothalamic amenorrhea. Now, this is a condition that I think is not talked about enough in the industry. It's kind of a little bit swept under the rug. And not taken seriously enough, but it is definitely a serious issue for women out there competing or athletes or just generally dieting and exercising. So I'll tell you a bit about what it is. If you've never heard of it before, hypothalamic amenorrhea is when your menstrual cycle and periods stop due to the stress placed on the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So this is usually caused by chronic undereating and low carbohydrate and fat diets. So, Lucy, welcome. Thank you so much for being on the podcast with us today. Tell us a bit about yourself and your journey with eating disorders and HA.
Thank you for having me on. Always a pleasure to be asked. Okay, long story. So I have had HA in my life, and I actually went through recovery from hypothalamic amenorrhea. We often shorten it to HA. It's quite a mouthful. So if you hear me saying HA, that's what I'm talking about. So I actually went through recovery from HA 2 times through, which is never a fun time. But the way that I kind of got myself into a place where I had HA started way back in my early 20s, about 5 years ago, when I embarked on my first real serious diet and fitness routine. So what started quite innocently as just a shift towards a more healthy lifestyle soon kind of spiraled into more disordered behaviors around food and exercise. A lot of these behaviors I did disguise quite well as just being the fitness girl. So I would kind of do my macro tracking and I would go and lift weights. And I just had this dream of being the ultimate bikini girl. And eventually, to be honest, I got to a very lean body fat percentage in my quest to achieve this body ideal. And then I came off the contraceptive pill and my period was missing. So quite often you hear that it can take a little bit of time for your period to come back when you go off the pill. For me, I kind of gave it six to 8 months, and then I was like, okay, I think there's something wrong here. So when I came off the pill, this was in about 2017, so it was a few years ago now. I came off the pill, I realized that there was something wrong, and so that was when I really started to deep dive into the research to really figure out what was going on and how I could fix this situation. So there's a lot out there on the internet about HA, about loss of period and that kind of stuff. And I started to read about it, and I would try every single, pill and acupuncture and naturopathy and all of these things because I was so desperate to get it back. But I kept on stumbling across this idea that I needed to eat more and move less, but I could not get my head around it. So I was trying everything that I could to avoid just doing the inevitable, which was to gain some body fat and to just pull back on my training. Eventually, after about 6 months of trying all these other methods, I thought, okay, I've just got to do this. So the most popular and most well-known method for recovering from HA is outlined in a book called No Period, Now What? By Nicola Rinaldi. She is a researcher who has done a lot of research on HA, and she put together this book with the ultimate recovery strategy, and it's called Going All In. You may be familiar with this idea of all in. There's a few big YouTubers who have documented their process of going all in. So you might have heard of it before. It does require eating a very large amount of food. Well, not actually that large, but when I was in my eating disorder, I thought it was large. It's about 2,500 calories a day as the absolute bare minimum and 0 exercise. So I thought, okay, I've just got to do this. And I just pulled the Band-Aid off and I just did it. It took me 5 weeks to get my period back from doing that. But because it all happened so quickly, I gained weight so quickly, I made these changes overnight. I didn't actually address any of the stuff that was going on in my head. And so shortly after I got my period back, I was straight back on to those disordered eating habits. I was straight back onto the weight loss diet, and I lost all of the weight again pretty quickly, and my period disappeared again. So that was kind of round one. Round two, it took me about 12 months to get that strength back to tackle it again. So round two was at the start of 2020. So the start of last year, I took a lot more of a moderate approach to my recovery. I actually sought out help from someone who could support me. And that was from someone called Sarah Liz King, who is now my employer. And she took me through a coaching program. So she coached me through this process of slowly reintroducing more food till I built up to that higher calorie intake, and then slowly pulling back the exercise to a more kind of moderate and appropriate amount, so that I could do the mental work whilst I was making these slow and steady behavioral changes. And that for me was crucial to my recovery, because addressing the psychological side of things is what really underpins all of those behaviors, those, dieting behaviors. So that worked. It took a little bit longer. It took 3 months, but now I am 12 months down the track, and I am regularly cycling with a normal length menstrual cycle, and I'm training the hardest that I ever had. So full recovery is possible. It's a long process, but yeah, it's definitely something that I'm really passionate about teaching people about.
Wow, what a journey. You have definitely been through a lot to do with your hormones and HA recovery. It definitely is a mental game more than, well, as much as physical, sometimes more. So the first time you lost your period, did it affect you physically at all, or was it more that you were just a little bit worried about future fertility or anything like that? Or did you actually feel sick, or any physical things that happened?
Yeah, so there's a lot of kind of physical symptoms that are associated with HA, and they're quite common across all HA cases. So, of course, your sex hormones are also really important in your libido. So 0, 0, 0 sex drive at all, and also 0 lubrication down there. So when I did engage in sexual intercourse, it was extremely painful. So those are just some direct hormonal connections there. Another one is feeling cold all the time, and that was kind of largely due to my low body fat percentage. And then that kind of leads to you growing more hair over your body as your body's response to trying to keep warm. Digestive discomfort, and that is just because of being in that low calorie deficit for a long period of time. Your body kind of wants to use that energy for what it really, really needs it for. So sometimes it will send some calories away from your digestive system to the areas that need it, just to conserve energy. So often digestive upset is a common symptom. Hair fell out. A lot of hair fell out. My hair got very, very thin, and I just noticed bad skin, bad nails. So they're kind of some of the big symptoms that people tend to notice. And then also those psychological symptoms. So quite often it's kind of a self-perpetuating cycle in terms of, your anxiety can be exaggerated by kind of the lack of fuel availability that you're giving yourself. So yeah, a lot of anxiety symptoms and that kind of stuff that kind of came along with the HA.
Yeah, wow. So those are the sort of short-term signs and symptoms, and then you went through that recovery. Is there research showing that there's long-term side effects, I guess, other than infertility? Can it affect you down the line?
Absolutely. So the big one is actually your bone health. So estrogen, which is our main female sex hormone, has a role to play in protecting your bone. So in HA, your estrogen is significantly lowered, and we do notice that between 30 to 50% of cases have osteoporosis or very, very low bone density. So when you don't have a period, you can lose up to 2% of your total bone mass per year that you don't have a period. So that's one of the really, really big things to stay on top of, because quite often women who have HA are right in the middle of their fertile years, which is when our bone density is maximized. So at the age of 25, that's when we reach our peak bone mineral density. And then after that, things start to kind of drop off. And then, of course, when you hit menopause, it really drops off. So maximizing bone density at the time when your body is menstruating when you've got that estrogen, those high levels of estrogen is so important because it's going to help prevent your risk of osteoporosis later in life. So that's one of the big side effects. There's also high risk of cardiovascular events, and that is another symptom, but that's a little bit rarer, and that's more of a really, really long-term kind of symptom.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, so in the fitness industry, we're all about health and, being losing weight for your health and all that kind of stuff, but no one really talks about the detriments of being exercising too much and being too lean. So women in sport and athletes and competing and things like that, do you think it's quite common but sort of normalised a bit?
It is normalised, and I kind of found that there was a lot of discussions around it's a normal thing that occurs to women when they are getting close to, say, a big sporting event or a competition or something, that they lose their period, and that's normal. It's actually not. And if you are interested in the performance side of things, I really encourage you to check out someone called Dr. Stacey Sims. She's written a book called Raw, and she's got a great Instagram page as well. So she is all about researching female physiology in sport. And she talks a lot about how your hormones are actually an ergogenic aid. So your sex hormones aid your muscle growth and your recovery from your sessions. And so when they are not at their full potential, then your ability to perform well in your training is actually there's a cap on how well you can perform. So in terms of the fact that it's normalized just makes no sense to me, because we're stopping women from performing to their full potential in their training by not having those hormones in place that can actually help to support training and recovery.
Yeah, wow. I had actually never heard of hypothalamic amenorrhea until a few years ago. I actually competed in some bodybuilding competitions back in 2014 before kids, and I didn't even realise it at the time, but I did lose my period for about 2 to 3 months. I just thought, I actually wasn't tracking my cycle, so I didn't really notice, but my husband actually was the one that told me. And I got really sick after competing. I got down to about 12% body fat, and the stage and everything was fun, but I didn't actually realise how much it affected my body, and I got really sick, and I just couldn't function properly. I had to stop going to the gym, just physically couldn't actually do it. And I ended up gaining about 10 kilos before getting my cycle back. And then I got pregnant straight away after that, which was a little bit unexpected because, I guess I wasn't really looking after my health. I wasn't tracking my cycle. And then quickly gained another 30 kilos. So, it just really badly affected my my body's metabolism and hormones and everything. But I think I was definitely lucky to get it back. So, only after a few months, and then get pregnant again. I think I see a lot of women these days struggling with wanting to have another baby or wanting to get pregnant for the first time, and only just discovering that they actually don't have a period because they've been on the pill and they've been masking it with that. And how do you diagnose HA, or is there just symptoms and then you've definitely got it, or is there tests that you can do?
Yeah, so HA is a diagnosis of exclusion. So basically we just have to exclude anything else that it could be. So in terms of getting a diagnosis, your best bet would be to go to your doctor. Just bear in mind that a lot of doctors actually don't really know about the prevalence of HA. So sometimes you might need to get a few opinions. So what will happen is when you go to your doctor, they will probably send you off to get a number of different tests. The big one is getting a blood test, and they will look at your hormone levels to make that assessment. And then they might also send you off to get some ultrasounds, just because they need to rule out something like PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome. So they'll need to look at an ultrasound of your ovaries. There's a couple of other things that it could be as well. So a pituitary tumor, which is in the brain. So they may send you for some scans for that. But the big thing really is looking at that blood test. So once they've done all those tests, they will be able to rule out the presence of any of those other conditions. And then kind of what you're left with is that HA diagnosis. In general, kind of when I'm talking to people about this, if your loss of menstrual cycle is also coupled with a low calorie or restrictive diet, and quite a high level exercise routine, the most likely diagnosis that you're looking at is HA. So if you are ticking those boxes in your head, then yeah, it's probably HA, but it is still really important to go and get those other potential diagnoses ruled out.
Yeah, definitely. So once diagnosed with HA, I guess it's more like a mental game of how do you get someone to eat more and train less when it is a disordered eating behavior and it is more of a psychological thing?
Yeah, so that's the hard part. A lot of people who come to us for recovery support, they are at that place where they are ready to recover and they're ready to get their health back on track. So a lot of what we do is working with them to help them to reform those mindsets that are keeping them stuck in disordered behaviors and to come up with strategies that they can use to overcome fear, because all of this is grounded in fear. It's this fear of gaining weight. It's this fear of losing your identity as the fit girl. It's this fear of what could happen if you stop training and what would happen if you eat more and what other people will think of you. So it's often identifying those fears, naming those fears, and then coming up with a toolbox of strategies that we can use to overcome those fears as we make the behavior changes necessary in order to get your cycle back. So that's a huge part of what we do. Also just that support in helping people deal with the discomfort of what they might be going through. I'm never going to say that weight gain is not uncomfortable. It is extremely uncomfortable, and supporting people through that process by helping them deal with that discomfort and helping them rewire their brain in a way where they value their body beyond simply what their body looks like is also another really, really big part of it. So yeah, I mean, in the end, the person needs to be at the point where they are ready to make that change. They're ready to get their period back. They're ready to get their life back. And we give them the strategies and the support that they need to make those changes.
Yeah, wow. So did you start the Recovery Club because there wasn't, you couldn't find much support or resources when you were going through it?
Yeah, so the reason that myself and my my boss, Sarah, we started Recovery Club was because we really noticed that there was a huge I guess as you said, you hadn't heard about HA until about 3 years ago. And because no one's talking about it, you feel so lonely in this recovery process. It can feel so isolating because a lot of what you're doing is going against cultural norms. You know, you're trying to actively gain weight. You're trying to actively exercise less. And that is so difficult to do on your own. So we really, really wanted to create a supportive community of women who are all walking this same road together, because there is something so empowering about having other women around you who are also really, really striving towards, you know, getting their health back, getting a better life back. And inside the Recovery Club, we have been absolutely amazed at the amount of support that these women are giving each other and the way that they're celebrating the wins that they are all achieving. So yeah, it's just created an environment for people to not feel so alone on this recovery journey.
Yeah, definitely. So can you give us a bit of an insight into, I know it'd be different for everyone, but say if someone was training, 6 to 7 days a week and eating 1,000 to 1,500 calories a day, would you slowly increase their calories and slowly reduce their exercise days or intensity? How does that look?
Yeah, so ideally, in the end, the big number that we're aiming to hit in terms of calorie intake is 2,500 calories a day. That's our baseline level. Sometimes jumping straight up to that overnight is just not going to work for people. So we want to try to increase that over the course of the first few weeks until we start to get that nice high consistent intake going. So we obviously work with our clients to try to give them strategies that they can use to kind of either increase the frequency of their meals or increase the energy density of their meals, just in a slow incremental fashion over a course of several weeks. And then in terms of their training, again, it's the opposite. So we're doing a slow cutback from week to week. So yeah, as I said, 2,500 calories, that's our target that we build up to. And then in terms of the training, every woman has a different tolerance for what level of training volume that their body can tolerate. For some women, they will need to basically completely cut training. For other women, they will be able to keep it in. I was lucky enough that my exercise routine was able to stay in my life, but it was significantly lower than what I would normally do. And usually the kind of things that we do is we might cut, say, 1 or 2 days of training, so adding in a couple of extra rest days. We might also put a limit on the intensity. So we usually set an RPE target to limit their intensity so that they're not, going to failure or going to these max kind of sets. And then other ways that we can kind of put a cap on their training volume is, cutting down some sets. If you're doing 4 or 5 sets on stuff, pulling back to 3 on everything, keeping those reps low, keeping the reps sub 10, those kind of things. There's some other strategies that we can use just to create some more structure around training that is aligned with that recovery goal.
Yeah, definitely. I guess one of the hardest parts, well, it is a hard part for anyone, is gaining weight is uncomfortable, but it's one of those things that you slowly have to embrace and accept, gaining body fat, gaining weight. And I think one of the things that helped me a lot when I was going through my eating disorders and disordered behaviours was following Instagram people that were body positive and who had who were sort of on a similar journey, or who had gotten recovery, or body positivity and things like that on social media, just following more accounts of women who had high body fat percentages, who weren't lean all the time, who weren't training every day. It really helped to balance that, what I was seeing and what was going through my brain as I was looking at social media all the time, to see, okay, it is normal to have body fat. It is normal to have cellulite. It's normal to have, all these things. And it's okay to not exercise every day to your fullest intensity. And you're still fit and healthy. You're still a fitness professional. You're still a fit girl, if that's what you really want to identify as, because fitness isn't being lean, and health is definitely not being lean, and putting your body through that every day. So I guess that's what helped me in being able to eat more and have a higher body fat percentage. And I just want anyone out there who might be struggling with that to know that it is definitely possible to feel good about yourself at a high body fat. It is so possible, because I actually never thought I would feel this good at 31% body fat and, size 12. I absolutely did not think that was ever going to happen. But I can tell you that I feel really good. I feel better than I ever felt. So, I hope anyone out there can hold on to that and start seeking support. So do you have any, advice for anyone that might be thinking they're going through this, or anyone that wants to maybe compete in some bodybuilding or athlete competitions and is worried about this?
Yes. So in terms of if you are an athlete or if you are someone who wishes to compete, I think it's really, really important to go into these processes from an educated perspective, knowing the risks that you could be kind of entering into. So obviously the hormonal disturbances from getting down to a low body fat percentage or training very, very high are very, very real, and they're very, very common. One thing that I would really recommend is getting nutritional support to support you in your training. So that means getting support from someone who specializes in this. So a sports dietitian would be the person to go to, because they can really, really help to provide you with that nutritional guidance that you need in order to safely train at a high level. And then also, that is kind of, if you're an athlete. And then in terms of competing, obviously it's a sport that is incredibly popular right now. And I completely understand that there's a really, really strong appeal to want to compete if you are in the fitness industry and if you are really, really loving your training. But yeah, as I said, it is one of those things where there's a very, very high risk of developing disordered eating from doing that kind of dieting. And it's important to recognize that the body that you achieve when you step on stage is not a forever body. And sometimes coming out the back end of that competing process can be extremely challenging psychologically. And that process of regaining weight in order to head back into an off season is incredibly challenging. So before you make that decision, it is very important to weigh up those kind of factors, just to be sure that you know exactly what you're getting into, because there are risks involved.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, looking back on when I competed, I definitely did not think that I would, come out the other side being bigger, not caring about how I looked and things like that. I literally thought that I was going to be lean for the rest of my life and that I would never stop being, the fitness freak and all that kind of stuff, until it really, really went downhill very quickly. So
it's hard for us to remember that, because we see so many big competitors online who are lean all year round. And it's hard to recognize that that's not the point. It's not the sustainable option. So yeah, it can become quite confusing.
Yeah, definitely. So do you have any advice for anyone that maybe wants to enter the fitness industry and become a trainer, for anyone that might come across women that are going through something like this?
Definitely. Learning about it is really, really going to help you in your career as a fitness professional if you are hoping to work with women. So learning about what signs to look out for. So you looking out for stuff like a decreased training performance, inability to recover, irritability, tiredness, and just asking them about their cycle. I mean, I work with a coach now, and and he's a male, and I'm constantly being like, cool, this is where I'm at in my cycle. I'm ovulating this week, or I'm in this level of my cycle, or my cycle was this length. And therefore he's able to tinker with my training. If my cycle length were to get longer, that's a sign that things aren't good. So then we'll tinker with my training and just pull back again for the next month, just to kind of get that balance back in. So just learning a little bit more about HA and about how that can manifest in your clients is a really, really great thing to do. The other thing that's becoming really, really popular in the fitness industry is learning about programming training around a woman's menstrual cycle. So at different phases of the cycle, women's bodies are better kind of prepped to deal with different kind of training loads. So if you're a female, you may kind of find that your PMS week, so the week leading up to your period, is just your worst week of training, and that's not a coincidence. That is because of the stage of your menstrual cycle. Around ovulation is right around when your performance is going to peak, so that's a great time to kind of schedule kind of those testing weeks or those higher volume weeks. So there's a lot of information out there on the internet that you can look into to learn about that. And it might be a really, really effective way for you to program your clients' training around their cycle.
Yeah, definitely. We do cover a lot about programming around the cycle in our Master Female Trainer course, and it's something that we are really excited to see become more normalised, because, yes, let's normalise training around our cycle, programming around our cycle, and let's denormalise losing your cycle and losing your health pretty much. So thank you so much for coming on our podcast today, Lucy. We are very privileged to talk to you, and love seeing what you're doing on your Instagram and with the Recovery Club. So if anyone wants to get in contact with Lucy, I will put her details on our Instagram page. But yeah, Lucy, can you tell us a bit about how people can get in contact with you?
Best way is through my Instagram, of course. I'm always there in my DMs answering questions that people may have. So it is just Lucy Ann McConnell. And if you are interested in finding out a little bit more about what we're covering in Recovery Club, you can head over to @_Recovery Club, and you can kind of see the type of content that we're covering and what kind of things we do there. So those are definitely the two best ways to find me. And I'd love to hear from you if you're interested in learning more.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lucy.
That's right. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Kelvin. We would absolutely love it if you could screenshot and tag us at Instagram @womensfitnessacademy_Oz. If you'd like some more information on how to become a Master Female Trainer, head to www.nwfacademy.com.au.